Hey guys, welcome back to Blaydes and Confused, and today we're going to be breaking down the next UFC Fight Night card, which is Curtis Blaydes versus Chris Daukaus. Now this is another international fight for the UFC. It'll be taking place in Columbus, so it's cool to see the UFC get things up and running again. You know, they're coming off an incredible Fight Night in London. I mean, that card was one of the best of all time in my opinion. The performances were incredible. Vicious knockouts, great performances from all fighters. There's a lot to live up to in this fight card, and what better way for it to be another showcase of two very good, tested heavyweights in Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus. So hopefully they put on a great show. But kicking off the main card was originally meant to be David Onama versus Nate Landwehr here, but Nate Landwehr has unfortunately had to withdraw due to injury. And I know the UFC are still wanting David Onama to stay on the card, so hopefully he is able to find a fight, because that dude is a great fighter. He's coming off a first round knockout over Gabriel Benitez, a very tough Mexican in the UFC, so hopefully he's able to stay on the card and get a fight, because he is one to look out for. That dude is a killer in the UFC right now, very game, very ready, always will take a fight on short notice and put up a good fight. So look out for that fighter, guys. He's a good one. So the next fight to talk about on the card is Ilir Latifi versus Alexei Oleinik. Now, a lot is at stake for Alexei Oleinik in this fight. He's coming off a 3-fight losing streak. Fair enough, he's lost to the likes of Derek Lewis, Chris Daukaus, who's also in the main event, as well as Sergey Spivak, who also put on an excellent performance over Greg Hardy on the Masvidal versus Covington fight. So in this fight, you know, it's Alexei's fighting for his job kind of deal. He needs this win to stay in the mix, to get re-signed by the UFC. So, you know, same goes with Ilir Latifi. I think he's 1-1 at heavyweight right now, so he's not really on too good of a run. Fair enough, he got a decision win over Tanner Boser, but he needs this win. He needs a credible name on his resume to get him back in the mix at the top 50 and top 20 of the division. You know, this is an important fight for both guys. Stylistically, you got two high level grapplers in there. Both have good submissions, especially Alexei Oleinik. That dude is known to be a boa constrictor, quite literally is his nickname. So he's got a lot of submissions on his resume. He's got 46 submission wins, which is absolutely crazy. So the chances are, if this goes to the ground, Alexei could get that choke, because Ilir Latifi doesn't really have too many submissions. He only got 4 submissions on his resume. He's actually got more knockouts, and he's mainly a grappler. I know he trains with the likes of Gustafsson, Kamzat, so hopefully he's going to be in a good mentality coming into this fight, because he's going to need it, because I believe Alexei is going to look to test him on the ground and really see where his grappling skills lie in the heavyweight division. But moving on to the next fight, we've got Matt Brown versus Bryan Barberena. Now, Matt Brown is a vet in the UFC. He's been in the UFC for 14 years. I believe he's got the most performance of the night bonuses in the UFC, which is absolutely crazy. He's been in there with some very talented fighters. You know, he's been in there with Damian Maia, Robbie Lawler, Carlos Condit. Coming off a big win over Diego Lima, knocked him out in the second round. So he's got a very good opponent ahead of him now, Bryan Barberena. He always puts on a show. He puts on some great fights in the UFC. You know, he's fairly young. He's 32 years old, so you know, he's definitely going to be the more sort of prime fighter, looking to get a good, credible name on his resume. If he can beat a guy like Matt Brown, it's a good name, as I say, to have fought, just to get to the experience with that level of fighter. You know, stylistically, you've got two high-level strikers in there, so this should have all the ingredients for a nice, juicy knockout. So hopefully Matt Brown is able to get the job done. I'm definitely rooting for him. As I say, he's been in the UFC for ages, so it's always nice to see vets go on a nice bit of a win streak and, you know, get a crack at the top 15 again. Matt Brown is quite old in his career now, but hopefully he's able to stay for a long time and continue to get some victories. But moving on to the next fight, we have Askar Askarov versus Kai Kara-France. Now this is a huge fight in the flyweight division, in my opinion. This could determine who gets the next title shot. Kai Kara-France coming over a great win over Cody Garbrandt, knocked him out in the first round, smoked him. His speed was just impeccable in that fight. I think it really stunned Cody Garbrandt. Askar Askarov's also coming off an impressive victory over Joseph Benavidez. Now, Askar Askarov is undefeated in the UFC. He's also been in there with Brandon Moreno, and I believe it was a draw. So he's fought some of the best fighters in the flyweight division. As I say, big implications on the division. I know the UFC are looking at booking Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno for a July release, but hopefully, if these guys put on a great performance, maybe the UFC might think, well, let's put some new blood up there and give Figueiredo a new opponent. Perhaps if these guys do really deliver a fight of the night or a knockout, as I say, maybe the UFC might think just to put them in the mix. I definitely think they deserve it. Both guys would deserve a title shot if they're able to get a victory. As I say, both will be on winning streaks and will have some good names on their resume. Stylistically, it's a tough fight for both. Both guys are very well rounded. Both guys like to stand and bang, but they also have good grappling. So as I say, I think it's a fairly even fight. Askar Askarov, he's quite long and lean in the division. That being said, he actually doesn't have the reach advantage, which is kind of what I was getting to, but it seems Kai Kara-France will have it, even though he's kind of smaller. But if Kai can use his reach, implement that pressure he does, and Kai's got one punch knockout power. So this fight could end at any time, hence why he's got the name Don't Blink. So this is a very even, great fight to look forward to. As for a prediction, I'm going for Kai Kara-France. I think he's going to get the job done. I just think he's a bit quicker, a bit more agile on the feet. His striking is just far superior. Askar's a bit of a slow starter. He sort of builds up throughout the rounds. He gets better as the rounds go on, but I think that'll be his biggest disadvantage against Kai Kara-France. Kai's a fast starter and he can get the knockout any point in the fight. That's I say, great fight for the flyweight division. Hopefully these guys put on a great show for the UFC, and as I say, propel themselves into title contention. But moving on to the co-main event, we have Joanne Calderwood versus Alexa Grasso. Now this is another important fight for Joanne Calderwood. She's unfortunately on a 2-fight losing streak. She's lost to the likes of Lauren Murphy and Talia Santos. Both girls have or will be fighting for the title. Lauren Murphy just came over a loss over Shevchenko, a knockout loss. So, she's lost to some fairly good opponents. Talia Santos is also booked to fight Shevchenko in June. So as I say, she's lost to 2 title contenders in a fight. So all the opponents on the list has fought and lost to Shevchenko. So she's lost to number 1, number 2 contenders. So it's not a huge loss. Doesn't look too bad because these girls have put up quite tough fights against Shevchenko, especially Jennifer Maia, and I believe Lauren Murphy, for the time that she lasted, was doing fairly decent. But as I say, important fight for Joanne Calderwood. I believe this is another scenario where she could possibly be fighting for her UFC career and maybe just her career in general. If she loses 3 in a row, will she still have that same desire and motivation to climb back up? Because in my opinion, Joanne Calderwood's only other 1 fight away from getting a title shot. It would be a huge deal, for Scotland, for her just to get that title fight, especially if she's able to get a win over a young, hungry Mexican in Alexa Grasso, who's also coming off a win over Macy Barber, and it was a great performance. Alexa Grasso is also on a 2-fight winning streak, so a lot's at stake. If Alexa Grasso beats Joanne Calderwood, she'll be number 7 in the rankings. She'll be on a 3-fight win streak. It'll propel her to get to top 5 matchups and get her into title contention to face Shevchenko when there's really no to little competition for Shevchenko. She's ran through her division, so this is a fight for both girls to get in the mix, point the eyes to Shevchenko, say, hey, look, I'm here, I believe I can beat you. So both girls need this killer mentality to make a showcase in the flyweight division. As I say, very little contenders in there right now. Joanne Calderwood's a great fighter, full of heart, always puts on great performances in her fight. Especially her performance over Jessica Aya was a very tight-knit Muay Thai kickboxing fight, very high volume, so if she's able to put on a similar performance over Alexa Grasso, I think that'll propel her up into the top 5 again. Same goes with Alexa Grasso. If she can put on a dominant performance over Joanne Calderwood, as I say, puts her in the mix too. Stylistically, it's a very even fight. Both fighters are well-rounded, utilise their striking well, their kicks, their takedowns, so this should be a very competitive fight. But as for a prediction, I'm going to be rooting for Joanne Calderwood. I've got to. I think she's the only Scottish fighter in the UFC, and seeing the win that Paul Craig just had over the weekend at UFC London was incredible, and hopefully that motivates her, give her a bit more fire that, yeah, those Scots are there to stay in the UFC, and they're going to be in title contention very soon. I think, Paul Craig, he's only one fight away from a title shot. Joanne Calderwood's a couple wins and she'll be in contention, so this could be a big night, for Scottish MMA fighters. It could also propel into an event in Glasgow. If Joanne is able to get the win, she could be on a co-main with Paul Craig in a Scotland event, so that would be really cool. But I look forward to this fight. As I say, two great fighters in the flyweight division. But moving on to this epic main event, which should be an epic main event, in Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus. Now, both guys have been in there with some very skilled fighters. Now, unfortunately, Chris Daukaus is coming off a KO loss to Derek Lewis, but there's no shame in that. Derek Lewis has the most knockouts in UFC history, and I believe in the heavyweight division. And same goes with Curtis Blaydes. He's also felt the wrath of Derek Lewis's power, but Curtis Blaydes is coming off a win over Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Now, it wasn't the best performance, but it was a fairly decent performance. He was able to get takedowns and put Jairzinho Rozenstruik on his back foot. Never really let Jairzinho get going, so solid win for Curtis Blaydes in his last fight. Now, this is a huge opportunity for Chris Daukaus. This will put him in a great spot. This will put him in the top 5 if he is able to beat Curtis Blaydes. Not only that, but will cement himself as a top tier heavyweight. Because if he's able just to get a good win over a veteran in the UFC, a guy who's faced very high level competition, that puts him in there with the likes of Tai Tuivasa, Tom Aspinall, Cyril Gane. So this is a big fight for his career. It'll definitely prove a lot where he stands in the division. Chris Daukaus has got some pretty impressive wins. He's been in there with Alexei Oleinik. He was able to get the knockout. He's been in there with Shamil Abdurakhimov, able to get a knockout. So he's looked very promising in his run in the UFC so far. But as I say, big test for him. Curtis Blaydes has been in there with Junior Dos Santos and Ngannou. He's been in there with Volkov. He's been in there with some veterans in the UFC, so he's kind of seen it all in the heavyweight division. He's kind of faced every stylistic matchup you can imagine. So it's going to be interesting to see the game plan Chris Daukaus has, whether he's going to be similar to Derek Lewis and look for that uppercut coming in, or he's going to put a barrage of punches on him and hope that he's able to get the knockout. I know his brother is Kyle Daukaus, who's a high-level jiu-jitsu fighter, and he's coming off a first-round submission win in his last fight, and I know his brother will be in his corner, so if maybe Chris is able to catch him in a submission, I think those are his two ways to victory. I don't think he's going to get a decision victory. I don't think that'll be in his favour. I believe that'll be in Curtis Blaydes' favour. Curtis Blaydes is known to constantly wear and tear on their opponent with his takedowns, to drag them into a very dark place like he did with Volkov. He just relentless pressure on him. He never let him really get a breath or take a break. It was just non-stop. So in my opinion, Chris Daukaus needs to enforce his will, get Curtis Blaydes on his back foot, put high level pressure, get him thinking about his hands, maybe sort of bait him into an uppercut as Derrick Lewis did, or catch him in a submission. There's a lot of ways to win for Curtis Blaydes in this fight, and I think there's only limited on Chris Daukaus' side. So as I say, high level fight in the heavyweight division can have big implications on the top 5 and those kind of matchups that we'll see. So I'm really excited for this fight. As for a prediction, I am going to be rooting for Chris Daukaus. I believe he can get it done. I think he's going to catch Curtis Blaydes in a submission. I think he'll submit him probably early on in the fight, maybe in the second round. So I'm hoping he can get it done. Get some new blood in the heavyweight division, which would be really cool. But I'm going to pick 2 fights from the prelims, which I hope you guys check out. And now the first fight I want to talk about is Mark Diakiese versus Vyacheslav Borishev. Now I had to talk about Mark Diakiese, he's another Brit, so I'm definitely going to be rooting for him. The dude's very game in the UFC, he's had a lot of fight of the night, he's had some pretty good wins in the UFC, got wins over Lando Venata, Joseph Duffy. He's unfortunately coming off a 2-fight losing streak over Rafael Fiziev and Rafael Alves. So his weakness right now seems to be guys who are called Rafael, so hopefully he's able to get the victory. But Vyacheslav Borishev is no slouch in the UFC. He's coming off a 4-fight finish streak. So this is a tough fight for Mark Diakiese. Vyacheslav Borishev, he's very tough, he's very game, very well rounded, he's got submission wins in there, he's got knockouts. So this is a really tough fight for Mark, but that being said, if he beats this guy, it could even put him into top 15. If he gets an impressive win, it could propel him into that sort of top tier end of the lightweight division, in an already extremely competitive division with the likes of Poirier, Gaethje, Chandler, Gillespie, Makachev, Dariush. So there's some really tough names in the lightweight division. So even if he's able to get through Vyacheslav Borishev, he's still got some really talented names ahead of him. Even RDA, he's back in the mix now, so it's a very competitive division. It's a big opportunity for Vyacheslav Borishev to get a credible name in the UFC. Mark's been in there for a very long time. He's been in there with high level opponents. So as I say, big opportunity for both guys to steal one's thunder, just to get a vet on his resume in Vyacheslav Borishev, and Mark to snap a win streak from a tough Russian that ain't going to be going down anytime soon. As for a prediction, I really want Mark to get it done. I'll be rooting for him. I think he could definitely get it done. Unfortunately his last fight didn't go his way, but he looked calm, he looked composed, he looked ready. So hopefully he's able to deliver another fight of the night in this and get back on the winning ways. I would love to see it. Maybe he fights on the next UFC London card. That would be awesome. Stylistically, both guys, as I say, very well rounded, got knockouts and submissions on their resume. So this could be a recipe for another fight of the night. But the next fight I want to talk about is Neil Magny versus Max Griffin. Now this is a good fight for Max Griffin. I'm a bit confused as to why they matched Neil Magny with an unranked opponent. I think that's a bit unfair on his end, considering the dude's fought Michael Chiesa, he's fought Jeff Neal, he's fought Santiago Ponzinibbio. He's been in there with some real tough opponents in the UFC, and it just seems a bit unfair for the UFC to give him this fight, especially coming off a win over Jeff Neal. It doesn't really do anything for Neil Magny, and Neil Magny's been calling out Khamzat Chimaev. He's been trying to get a big fight in the division, and I just don't think this is the way for him. He's number 9, so as I say, nothing to really gain from beating Max Griffin. I just hope he can get the job done. He's a very well-rounded fighter, a great fighter in the division. I think he's one of the most active fighters in the UFC. Tends to fight at least 3 or 4 times a year, so big opportunity for Max Griffin. Max Griffin is a known knockout artist, so it'll be interesting to see how he does with the top end of the division. I'm excited for the fight. Hopefully Neil Magny can stun the UFC once again, get a good win, and try and get a top 5 matchup and propel himself into title contention. But I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. Yeah, I know this was a bit of a long one, but it is a pretty good card. Don't sleep on this card, guys. There may not be some heavily known fighters on the card, but I think it's definitely going to deliver and be a great card to watch. So definitely tune in and watch it. Hopefully this video has got you hyped. Stay tuned for more UFC content this week. I just want to say another big thank you for the support you guys have given me on my UFC London vid. It's my most viewed vid of recent times, so I do appreciate the support. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. As I say, more content coming this week about the UFC, so stay tuned, stay blazed, and peace.